Today, I've got an interview with Rick Rose. He was on the Blue Angels and flew Fat Albert from 2019 to 2021. We had a great time chatting all about the transition to the C-130J model, which I'll play for you here in just a sec. If you're new to this series, I'm interviewing a whole host of former Bert pilots and crew members to put together a documentary-style video explaining what Fat Albert is, what it does, and why it's so important to the team. If you're into that, please go down below, like the video, leave a comment, and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any of the remaining videos in this Fat Albert series. Enjoy the interview. Hello and welcome back to Aerospace Horizons. My name is Evan, and my interview guest for today is a former Blue Angel. He was with the team flying Fat Albert in the 2019 through 2021 seasons, which means he was there for the transition to the current J model aircraft, which will undoubtedly be a big topic of conversation today. Please welcome Major Rick Rose. Glad to be here.
Hey, thank you for having me, Evan. I really appreciate your time and getting this out there. So it's really awesome for me to be here.
Absolutely. And just to start us off here, what are you up to these days?
So now I'm actually in the reserves. I'm a major in the reserves, working as a recruiting support officer out of San Francisco. So I'm helping recruit America's best and brightest to join the Marine Corps. And then my civilian job now is United Airlines pilot. I fly the 757, 767 out of San Francisco. So a lot of changes in the last year, but things are going great.
Awesome. That's great to hear. So let's take a big step back and just start off with a big, broad question. And if you could please describe for us, first of all, what Fat Albert is, for those who might not know, and also the primary mission of Fat Albert.
So Fat Albert is a C-130. It's a four-engine turboprop aircraft, and it's dedicated to support the team logistically. That's the number one mission for the aircraft is really to help support the movements between each city, each show site that they travel to, which is hugely important because the cool thing about the team is that they're completely self-sufficient, and we make a lot of those moves on our own, and Fat Albert's really the enabler to make all that happen. So it's a kind of a tactical to kind of a medium to light size transport aircraft to help move all the assets needed, the personnel, the equipment, the tools, everything you really need to help fix jets on the road. Fat Albert's there to do that.
What was your role with Fat Albert and on the Blue Angels when you were on the team?
So you cover down on a lot of different responsibilities. Number one is just be the Marine Corps representation on the team. And I think a lot of people lose sight of what that entity is on the team. Really is the core, the Marine Corps representation on the team is Fat Albert. You know, we're all Marine air crew. So we take that very seriously. And, you know, we're very prideful about that. But that's kind of one of the roles. And the other role is obviously just to fly the plane and be reliable and be able to get the plane where they need it to go and help support in any way possible, whether it's logistically or, you know, we also help with outside entities. You know, during COVID, that was a very dynamic time on the team. I think with, you know, we didn't have Fat Albert during that time either for all of it. I think for a portion of it, we had Fat Albert, but so we covered down on helping schedule logistical assets to help out. Also with the air-to-air refueling assets, because they weren't really allowed to land anywhere. They just, when we're doing Operation America Strong, they needed help with the coordination piece and getting the airspace reserve and all that stuff. So we helped out with that. And then we also help out with a lot of the support officer roles. So as far as working in the tower, if you're not flying Fat Albert that day, you know, there's 3 Fat Albert pilots. So usually we would kind of swap out with who's going to be flying the demonstration that day and whatnot. And so there's other roles and responsibilities we cover down at either on a comm cart, communication cart down at center point to help be a safety observer, and then also work up in the air traffic control tower, if there is one, to help clear the airspace for the entire demonstration and make sure there's no interlopers or, you know, aircraft that are flying in there that shouldn't be in the TFR, the temporary flight restriction area. So we help out with that. And I think also something that's not really written down, I think we're also helpful with bridging the gap between support officers and pilots, because we're both. You have the support officer cadre, which is, your supply officer, maintenance officer, public affairs officer, your flight doc. And then you have the Bert pilots, and then you have the Delta. So 1 through 7. So the Bert pilots are really helpful in my mind to help give different perspectives and understandings when there's any sort of friction. If there is any on the team, we help kind of smooth that over. And, we bring a lot of personality to the team, I like to say, too, as well. So we like to have a lot of fun. And then also, just really help the perspective piece when it becomes, it's not like an issue, but like when someone needs a different understanding, or like, hey, can you explain to me what they meant by this or whatever? Because we speak both languages. So it was really helpful to kind of help be in the middle there.
And you mentioned it already a little bit, so we can get into it. I would love if you could take us back to 2020, which is a time a lot of us probably would like to forget. But that was just kind of a unique time for Fat Albert and sort of the transition. It was a period of transition. So I'd love if you could like sort of set the stage for where the team was at and where Fat Albert was going into 2019 when you joined the team.
Yeah, absolutely. There was a lot going on leading up to that, because that was right around the time we were supposed to get the new aircraft delivery. The new C-130J Fat Albert aircraft, new to us. It was lightly used by the Royal Air Force out in England, and they were kind of transitioning to the A400. But there's a whole process leading up to that to acquire that aircraft. There's a lot of people that put in a lot of work leading up to that point. And I just timed it out perfectly, because I was the guy that was able to go pick it up, and work off everyone else's hard work. I got to just go get it. But leading up to that point, there was obviously a lot of delays, and we kept hearing grumblings about I guess there's some virus going on. No one really knows what's going on here. And then it started to become a bigger issue and a bigger issue. And then it kind of boiled over to the point. And I think we're at winter training during the time when it started becoming a much bigger issue. And we realized, hey, like, we might not have an air show season this year. And really all it took was the first, I think El Centro canceled. At that point, mostly all the Navy shows canceled first. So the civilian shows tried to hold on for a little while until it just the virus was out of control at that point. And then it was during that time, Marshall was the contracting company out, the defense aerospace company out in England that was contracted to get the aircraft ready for us. Like, okay, your plane's ready to be picked up now in England, and this at the height of COVID. We're like, oh my gosh, this timing is going to be difficult, to say the least. So we had to mitigate a lot of that, and working with Monica Borza, the flight doc, and then Doc Hicks was huge, because they helped us navigate getting through the COVID environment to go fly out to England and then help bring that aircraft back. Because there's a lot of work to do once we got there, but we didn't realize how many delays were going to occur once we got out there. So we were in England for a good time, we didn't anticipate the amount of delays that were going to occur once we got out there. But there was a lot of things we needed to do on the Marine Corps administrative side, with accepting the aircraft and then doing all the maintenance, engine runs and stuff, the groundwork that's involved in getting the paperwork translated over from, the way England does it to the way we do it. All that stuff had to go down. So a lot of administrative stuff, but, a lot of delays, because I think they were in like min crew out at Marshall Aerospace Company coming in to help, because of COVID. So they only had so many people to help cover down and get us through and get the aircraft prepped and ready for us. But they did phenomenal work, for what they had during the time. And everyone was learning how to do all this stuff at the same time throughout the world, So we had to work through a lot of that. But we made it happen, thanks to, it was a team effort all around to get us to that point. And then we picked up Fat Albert around July is when we first did the first functional check flight, which is kind of like testing out a new car kind of thing. Like, there's a lot, you just go through, you put it through the ringer, you test all the systems on board. You just go down a checklist and you literally go through every single system and make sure it works as advertised. So we did all that and it worked perfect. it was almost 100%. It was the best functional check flight that I've ever done. It was just a very, very clean aircraft, and they took such great care of it out there. So it was easy for us to kind of, once it was ready to go, hey, it's ready to fly, it made it very smooth process from there. And then, choosing our path home was difficult too, because each country has its own COVID mitigation strategy. So having to figure out, hey, choose your adventure home. Oh, by the way, Iceland has a whole different set of rules. Canada has a whole different set of rules. And then we got to go through all these different issues and kind of just work out the problem. So we came up with a plan. It was going to be a long day just going through Iceland, just pick up gas and immediately go. So we didn't stay in Iceland for very long. We just grabbed gas and then continued on to Bangor, Maine. And then that's where it kind of got interesting from there. We thought we were home free from there, but we weren't. It was, I might be going a little bit too far down the story here, but we had to get the plane to Fort Worth, essentially, because Fort Worth was a Marine Reserve squadron out there, and they were willing to help us out, get the aircraft accepted, because we have a very small maintenance footprint on the Blue Angels, just enough to really get by. And the J model requires a lot of maintenance help. Just by nature of, there's a lot of avionics stuff on it and different things that require more time and hands on the aircraft. But for the acceptance piece of it, we had to get it to Fort Worth to help do the full acceptance, and then we can be up and running and hit the ground with the team and start supporting right away. But that was the next thing we had to do. So on our way down, we landed in Bangor, Maine uneventfully, and then we were going to continue on to Fort Worth. Well, there was a remnants of a hurricane. I can't remember the name of it, that was spinning up the coast right around that time in 2020. It must have been, in July 2020, there was a remnants of a hurricane that was spinning up the East Coast there. And so by nature of flying a turboprop aircraft, you got to fly. Sometimes there's no way around the weather. You got to fly through it. If you can't fly around it because we don't have the gas or whatever, you got to, and the aircraft's built for that, right? So there's a big margin that you can use to get through some weather there. But we started hitting some significant icing going through right around Boston area. And it was right around there. We had a loadmaster in the back start to tell us, hey, we can smell something burning. And then we also feel the right hand bulkhead is extremely hot to the touch. And we're like, oh, that's not good. That's really not good. And then right then and there, we got a master warning light, bleed air leak. From the right side of the aircraft. And a lot of times the system's set up to automatically isolate any sort of bleed air leak, which is essentially just hot air coming from the engine that's used for different systems like anti-ice equipment, where it just warms up the wing and kicks off the ice. So the plane was telling us it indicated there was a leak somewhere on the right side. And if it can't isolate it, that becomes a problem really quick. The problem is, after going through the checklist, we realized that we had lost all the anti-ice system on the right side because it had isolated that valve that controls the air that goes into that right wing. And you got to get out of icing right away. Well, we were in icing, so we had to get down quickly and figure out. And I was flying with Bo Mayberry, prior M1, so we worked it out pretty quickly. We both kind of, hey, what do you think? Said, hey, I think we should definitely divert somewhere. First of all, get out of icing. So we descended down into warmer air, got out of icing, and then started immediately talking to air traffic control and working with Boston. Actually, Boston was like directly below us because, of course, this is almost like a flight school scenario where they kind of brief you on like, what would you do in this situation kind of thing, except it was actually happening. It was kind of crazy how it all worked out. But all the airfields in the area were down to minimum, so the cloud layers are really low. We would have to shoot an approach in through the clouds, except for Boston International. Boston Logan was open, and they were showing VMC conditions, so visual conditions. And we're like, well, we'll go there, So even though it was super busy, they got us in, they sequenced us in, and then we landed. So that was an eventful trip home. They fixed the issue. They found it was a duct that came basically loose in the right side of the plane, was just blowing super hot air everywhere. So luckily we landed quickly before it became more of a bigger problem. But so that was an eventful trip home in the Fat Albert J model. We got it back to Fort Worth and they got it all fixed up. But there's a lot going on during that time, and that was during COVID. So we're landing in Boston at a place, and we immediately have to call the team and the flight doc like, hey, we're in Boston. and we're going over the, what is the infection rate there and everything? Where can we stay at? What was the best place we should probably stay? Because we weren't going to fly that day, how long are we going to have to quarantine if we go to Fort Worth, all this stuff. So it definitely made the process a little bit longer getting back home, but we did it. None of us got COVID, and it all worked out. So it was a long process, though.
I'd like to see the faces of all the people at Boston Logan as you guys are coming in.
You weren't expecting us, that's for sure. Yeah.
If I'd love to take a step back a little bit and talk a little bit about the outgoing T model that the J model was replacing. I know there were some issues which led to the J model entering the equation in the first place. But could you sort of outline like the state of where things were left with the T model before the J model came on?
Yeah, so I wasn't on the team when they actually put that plane to rest, the last T model, but it was definitely a big surprise for the team. So I'm kind of speaking secondhand here from Bo Mayberry and Mark Montgomery that were on the team during that time, when they kind of got the rug pulled out from underneath them a little bit from, the engineers kind of, what really, from my understanding, is they found cracks in the engine nacelle area that shouldn't have been there until a certain time. So every airplane has its, set advertised timeline by Lockheed, and then the Navy takes that aircraft, Marine Corps takes that aircraft and kind of narrows that down even further to give them more of a buffer, safety buffer for how they fly these aircraft. But they have their own limitations, and upon inspection, normal phase inspections, it's every so many months or years or whatever, you got to put the plane in to undergo a very thorough inspection. And upon that, they found some cracks in the engine nacelle area that shouldn't have been there until much further on down the line. So they're a little bit very surprised by that. And it was a significant issue, significant enough where they had to send that plane to the boneyard. It was done. One time, fly it home. You can't fly this plane again, because the stress and the fatigue on that aircraft were appearing much quicker than normal. So that's kind of how that old T model went down. It went to Fort Worth, and now it's still there to this day, parked out in front of the base there along the road. So you can see it. That same model is out there. It was a great aircraft. It was on the team for a while. It flew a ton. I wish I knew the hours off the top of my head, but that aircraft in particular flew a lot for the team, a lot. So did a lot of hard work for the team. So it just came much sooner than we expected. So we had to find another asset to kind of help bridge the gap, because we knew the J model wasn't going to be coming for at least another 6 months, and we had a show season to support. So the Marine Corps was sundowning another T model squadron out of New York, out of Stewart Air Base there, and so they were sundowning the squadron, and they were sending a lot of those aircraft to the boneyard. So because they were reaching their life limit, they weren't willing to transition them, or no one else was really needed them, because most C-130 squadrons were transitioning to the J model. So, it was perfect timing, because the team was like, we'll take one of those. We'll definitely need one to help bridge the gap. So we saved one. It was actually in Tucson, ready to go into the boneyard, and we sent a bunch of flight engineers and maintenance personnel from the team to get that plane back in the flying shape. And they were out there like in the summer months in Tucson, refurbishing this plane, getting it back into a flying status. And I was just joining the team during that time, so I heard the stories about what they went through to get that plane up and running, just the work days they put in to get that plane ready, and they got it up and running. And we flew. I went through conversion training, because I had never touched a T model until I joined the team, and I went through the conversion training out at Fort Worth, and then they sent me out as soon as we got this plane, and I started flying it. We hit the ground running to help support the team logistically with that aircraft. But it didn't last long. I think we only had it for about 4 or 5 months. So it was a great plane, great Marine Corps C-130 we're using on the team that we kind of incorporated into the team to help bridge the gap until we got the J model. But so that was kind of the last bit of the T model history.
Was that Ernie?
Yeah, we kind of affectionately call it Ernie. Yeah, it's kind of like, because people, you show up to some show sites and they're expecting to see Fat Albert, and they see a gray an old beat up gray C-130 show up and we're like, oh, that's just Ernie. That it's kind of like because Bert has to go through maintenance cycles too, but the team still has to get supported. So you have to find an Ernie somewhere. Usually a squadron is willing or is told to give up a C-130 to help the Blue Angels out. And then we take it from there for a little bit while Bert is in the shop getting maintenance done.
Got it. Can you talk a little bit about like you're joining the team and your time on the team? I know you said you were on from 2019 to 2021, which is a little bit shorter than the standard Fat Albert pilot rotation. What was up with that?
So myself and Austin Huckabee both were selected at the same time to join the team because at that time, you want 3 Fat Albert pilots on the team because it helps with covering down. If one of us can't fly for whatever reason, you can still fly a Herc, and also it helps having 3 to cover down on all the different ground jobs, whether it comes to like, aviation safety is a big one. One of them is a safety officer, but so it was only Bo Mayberry and Mark Montgomery when myself and Captain Huckabee were rushing the team. Lucky enough, we both got selected. So we both got selected at the same time. And one of us, the normal tour is 3 years, like you said, but one of us had to do a short tour by nature of that, since we both got selected for the team at the same time. So I was a little bit more senior to him, and based on timing for like career progression and everything, and when I was going to be promoting, we had a conversation about it. He wanted to be on the team for 3 years, and I was like, that's that works out fine. I think 2 years is okay. And then also it'll be right around the time I'll be promoting to major and all that. And then I'll be up for my department head tour in the active duty squadron. So timing wise, it just made more sense for me to do the 2 year. So Huckabee stayed on for the 3 years. So that's why we had a kind of a weird offset timeline.
So going back to the J model, I know you mentioned came from the Royal Air Force. Can you talk a little bit about the history of like how that deal went down? Why were the Blue Angels getting a British aircraft?
Yeah, there was a lot of dead ends, a lot of obstacles, a lot of work behind the scenes to make this happen. And I can name like 10 Bert pilots throughout history that were working on this project for so long to get to this point, because they just hit one roadblock after another. The C-130 is the longest production run aircraft of any other aircraft in the history of the world. So maybe just the U.S. It could be the world though. But it's still in production. It's still being built. I went to the assembly line in Marietta, Georgia. And if you were to put an order in for a C-130 right now, brand new off the line, you weren't going to see it for at least 5 years, maybe, so we couldn't afford to wait that long. So that wasn't an option to buy a new one right off the line. The second option was to get one from maybe like intercepted delivery to a fleet squadron that was already set to get them. But that's not an option either, because it's such a critical asset in the Marine Corps that there's no way a general is going to give up a C-130J, a KC-130J to go to the Blues. This is not going to happen, because it's just such, they need those planes so much every single day, and they can't even spare one, so that wasn't an option. So I don't know who it was, but someone, I'm sure the more interviews you do, you might get down the bottom of it, who actually kind of came up with the idea. It might have been Mark Montgomery or someone around that timeline that came up with the idea of getting it. Also, there was I wish I knew his name. There was a general that kind of really had our back with getting some money allocated after hearing about, hey, the Brits are getting rid of their C-130Js. So there might be an angle there. And that was like the last ditch effort to get a C-130 onto the team. Otherwise, we were going to have to start relying on, outside entities. And that might have been the end of the program at that point, because once you ship that way, it's hard to get back to the original team. So they hit that angle hard with the Royal Air Force C-130J and end up working out. It was just basically a money pot game at that point. Like, where is this money going to come from? Who's going to pay for it? Is it going to be the Marine Corps or the Navy? Who's going to pay for all the support assets? Because you had to get all new support equipment. It was just a big logistical nightmare when it came to that. And a lot of people put their heads together to find the solution, and they made it happen. It was just so much work getting to that point. That's why I'm saying, like, I'm not taking any credit for that. I'm just so grateful for everyone that did all the work getting to that point. I was just the lucky guy to show up and get the keys and fly. So it was nice. But yeah, there was a lot of background people that you will never know that did all this work to get to this point. So I'm just so grateful for them to do that, because now we have a great logistical asset still on the team. The tradition lives on, and people love it. So it's doing a great job.
So the paperwork is signed, it's happening. What modifications does that C-130J have to go through in order to be ready for the Blue Angels, and where are those modifications happening?
There were a couple things. So just by nature, because there's so many different variants of the C-132, and each country will buy their own specific package, what they want to fill whatever mission set they want that aircraft to fly. And the British, had a specific variant that they had. It was very similar to what we flew with the Marines, but there's subtle differences, like in the flight station. There's a couple things that are changed. We don't have a full-on systems suite next to the augmented crew station. It's more of just a bookshelf in Fat Albert. There's just kind of a radio operator station. There's not a whole lot there. So it's a lot lighter. By nature of that, the aircraft is missing a lot of different mission systems that we had in the KC-130J, so it's significantly lighter. It doesn't have external tanks on it, so it carries, upwards of 18,000 pounds less fuel than we're used to carrying, because each one of those tanks is about 9,000 pounds of fuel. Doesn't have the aerial refueling pods because it wasn't used for that mission. So, which was good for us in the Blues, because we always flew slick C-130s. So there was no AR pods, no external tanks. So we didn't have to modify it a whole lot. There was one thing that was kind of a head scratcher at the time with modifying it, because my understanding, and I could totally be wrong about this, is with the data set that we had in the Navy and Marine Corps to help manage the airframe life, essentially, when we started flying demonstrations, it became an issue because we didn't have anything really to compare. We only had a C-130 with tanks and pods on it, which, the data and the stress is a lot different because there's a lot of weight on the wing. So that data, you really can't use all those graphs and everything that the engineers use. You can't really use for a slick C-130, because it's totally different as far as the aerodynamics go and all the stressors on the aircraft when you're putting it through different phases of flight. So with that, we could get the data close enough, but we had to put fuel foam in it, which is essentially like a combat thing you put on C-130s. That it's just the fuel tanks on the wing are surrounded by this self-sealing foam. If you get shot at, bullet goes through the foam seals so you don't develop a significant fuel leak. Well, the plane that we got from the RAF didn't have that. It didn't have fuel foam on it, which is a lot of weight in the wings too. So that was one modification in order to help match the data sets they needed a little bit more closely. We had to put the fuel foam in Fat Albert. So I guess it's ready for combat now, but that was like one of the things. It also helped manage, because we'll get into this, I'm sure, later on when it gets to the demonstration part. There's a lot of things we learned. Weight in the wings helps with the aircraft fatigue. So that was another thing to help manage the aircraft life, especially if we wanted to start flying demonstration, is kind of that extra weight in the wings with the fuel foam actually helped manage the lifetime. But at first I'm like, we don't plan on sending this blue and gold plane out to combat anytime soon. Why are we doing this? So our dumb pilot brains had to get explained to from the engineers, hey, this is why, I get that on the surface doesn't make sense. And so they kind of explained. They had a lot of patience with us, which was nice. Myself being a criminal justice major, it was nice for them to have a lot of patience and help explain things to me. So that was one of them.
And was that all happening in Britain still?
No, actually, because that wasn't part of the contract. They weren't willing to do that because it was a big added cost and everything. And it came up a little bit, but I was like, we just need to get the plane. We just need to start supporting ASAP. Number one, I'm not concerned about the demonstration right now. I just want to be able to hit the ground running with this aircraft and help pulling our weight, so we got the plane, and then that was like, that'll be a future problem we'll deal with once we start trying to dive into the data with the demonstrator, which was a whole nother battle, getting into that. Not necessarily battle, but like problem to solve, So we worked that one out later on in the game for sure. But yeah, that wasn't done in Britain.
What so the bulk of the modifications, though, including the new livery, right, were all done in Britain?
Yes, yeah. So they did all the paint scheme, which was they did such a great job on that. And I remember we got the first few pictures of it. No one really knew. I didn't know what it was going to look like because they kind of kept it a little secret, I guess. And then the team members that have kind of came up with the idea and generated the new paint scheme, they showed it to me. I'm like, that's awesome. That's great. Because it is a different aircraft, and we wanted to break it out as such so people realize, like, hey, this isn't just the legacy Herc. This is a Super Hercules. So it's kind of like when they went from the legacy Hornet to the Super Hornet. But we wanted to kind of break it out differently with a paint job that matches the jets more closely, but also shows that it's a different aircraft in some ways. So they did all that there. There was one funny story where, the Blue Angels script on the side of Bert was, they showed us the pictures. We're like, hey, wow, this looks great. Looks awesome. And then you see the Blue Angel script is in the wrong font and it's painted on the plane. And you're like, oh no, so I'm sure the painters weren't too thrilled about that. So they had to go back and actually put the correct font, which was probably our mistake. We probably sent them something to where they thought this is what we wanted as far as the font goes, and that was what got painted on the plane. So they had to go back and then put the actual, because the Blue Angels font is a specific type of, cursive or whatever on there. So they had to go back and repaint that, but after that was done, looked amazing. It was perfect. We loved it.
A bunch of Marines learning how to be marketing guys over there.
Yeah, we learned a lot. Yeah, we definitely, there's a lot of things I didn't anticipate doing that I got to do as a Marine C-130 pilot on the team. It was really cool.
In terms of the pickup process and like checkout, I mean, I know you mentioned it a little bit, but can you walk us through like sort of exactly how that went down, like what you needed, what you were looking to get out of that process, and what you needed to like sign off on in order to take the aircraft home?
Yeah. So in order to do the checkout process, to make sure the aircraft is ready to fly home, kind of already hit on a couple of things, but really is just a full-on systems check. So think about when you're test driving a car or something like that, you got to go through everything. Hey, do the windshield wipers work? All that stuff, like just like in a car and a plane, you're doing all that stuff. So when you first show up, you're just really screening all the books first to make sure they didn't miss anything, because there's so much work getting that aircraft, because they really tore that aircraft down. You take the wings off, you take the engines out, you take a lot of the aircraft control surfaces off, you re-rig all that stuff, and then you put it back together again. So you just have to make sure you're kind of like 30,000 foot view as a pilot when you come in to look at all the books. And then you have your maintenance admin Marine looking through, because they can kind of speak the language a little bit better than you can, and to kind of see was there anything missed? Is there any red flags here that we need to be worried about? What's the history of the aircraft? So if there's any like repeat gripes or anything going on. So they really deep dive the books for the first week or so. It's a lot because you're looking at each book on each engine, any sort of write-ups along the fuselage, how many hours are on what component, the kind of things to just kind of train your eye to be like, okay, I want to keep an eye on that, or we definitely need to test that or something like that. So after that, everyone slaps the table, whether it's, the contractors, the maintenance personnel that worked on it, and the pilots worked on it, and air crew, like, okay, I think this plane's ready to go flying now. So they do a lot of ground checks at that point. So they put the engines through the paces, and they had a really great facilities there in Cambridge, England, because they have like a place you can taxi the plane to and just do full high-speed engine run-ups without having to do them on the runway or impede any sort of airport operation stuff. So they had a great little facility there. You could do a lot of those checks on the deck without delaying. So it didn't take a whole lot of time to do the ground checks. Passed with flying colors, no issues with that. And then we pick a day where the weather has to be good. You can't be in any sort of cloud cover conditions. You have to have basically a clear day in order to execute the check flight, just in case you have any sort of emergency. So to help mitigate any risk, you don't want weather to have a vote in that case. So at that point, we take off, and then it's really just like right from the get-go, you're testing the ground proximity warning system. So you'll see on a check flight with a C-130 especially, it does a weird profile taking off because you'll have to almost point the nose towards the ground as soon as you rotate. And that is really just to check to see if the ground proximity warning system is working. So it just start barking at you, pull up, all that stuff. So that's like the first check, and it's super like it happens quick. All these little checks you got to be doing throughout your profile as soon as you take off, and then you put it through its paces with all the emergency procedures as far as the backup. For instance, like the landing gear, does it come up and does it go down? Yes. Okay. Now can we bring the gear up mechanically without hydraulic power? Like in an emergency situation, say we lost hydraulics, can the gear come up? And that was one of the issues we ran into later on, is the gears were binding on the left main landing gear. We couldn't get it to go down manually. So that was one of the issues we ran into. We ended up jacking the plane and cycling it like 2 or 3 different times, which was a pain, but it ended up just being an alignment issue with the gears in one of the main landing gears. But that was like really the only significant issue we ran into during the flight, other than the emergency divert to Boston. But it really is just going through and putting the aircraft through its paces and checking all the systems to make sure they work. So especially with a full breakdown and rebuild of an aircraft, because there's different layers of it. So if like a plane that just hasn't flown in 30 days, there's a specific profile you fly for that for a check flight. But we were doing the full thing because the aircraft hadn't flown and had been broken down in multiple ways. So that's kind of how it works. So
now we've checked out the plane, we've covered the trip back, and now it's back in Fort Worth, right? What was the next step after that to get back up to operational speed?
So the next step was getting our safe for flight signed off by the Navy. So we had to get that plane back, and we had to basically go through an inspection with the Navy showing that we're capable of administratively safing this plane for flight. So on the enlisted side, we have a maintenance admin Marine, and to include, and he kind of manages all the maintenance Marines that you have power lines specific to engines and fuel, and then you have airframers, but we have one per shop basically. So we don't have a whole lot of Marines to cover down on each system, but we had to get signed off by the Navy to show that we were capable as a unit, as our own entity, to get this single aircraft safe for flight. So it was a short inspection. They came down to Pensacola, and they kind of just observe us safe the plane, and then the maintenance admin Marines will sign off on it once he or she believes that the plane's ready, and then just for a typical flight, and then pilot comes down, screens a book, sit for flight, flies, and then the plane captain as well. So it was kind of just showing, hey, we know the procedures, we can do this by the book. And then after that, we're done. We can start executing right away. And it was in the middle of the summertime, so the show season's on full swing at that point. So we basically just merged with the team right away and started supporting day one as soon as we were ready to go.
And then so Bert is fully up and operational and supporting the team at this point. And then the next step would be the conversation around the flight demonstration, which I know you said was a difficult one. Can you go into what that conversation was like and how it came about?
Yeah, I mean, I was fully anticipating during my time I was not going to be able to fly a demonstration. It just wasn't going to happen, at least for my year, because we just got this plane. Given the history of the little T model, how that ended up probably left a lot of bad taste in people's mouths, especially over at NavAir and PMA 207, which are kind of like the Navy entities that control the program office. And then you have NavAir, which the engineers that help manage the C-130 fleet throughout the Marine Corps and Navy. So the way that whole thing went down, it was tough. It was a big loss for everyone, losing that last T model. But so I was fully anticipating, hey, that's going to be an uphill battle getting this plane back in the demonstration. But I knew it was a battle worth fighting because, let's be real, like everyone, especially everyone in the C-130 fleet wants to fly a plane like that, and we don't really get to do that in the fleet. And it's a big attractor for good applicants coming to the team. And also fans love it. Like I didn't realize how big of a deal Fat Albert was until I was on the team after the show. And kids, especially kids, they love that plane, and seeing it in the show is hugely important. And also the Marine Corps representation aspect of it is so big. Usually always have like a Marine pilot in the Delta, but the Fat Albert team, like this kind of, they anchor down on that big time with, hey, this is the Marine Corps representation of the team. And so it's very important, hugely important to have that in front of the crowd, I think. So it's definitely a battle worth fighting, but I was solely focused on, hey, number one mission, we need to get this plane in support of the team logistically. Once we get enough in the trust bucket there, hey, we're reliable, we're doing the job, then maybe we can start having a conversation with boss about this and getting our foot in the door. And I still was like, this is a pipe dream for my season. It's not going to happen. Like this is definitely going to be a year or two before we even get to that point. But, there were some people that were definitely on our side getting it to that point. And we're very lucky. We had a lot of people that had our back, including boss Kesselring. He was all for it. He understood, and he kind of pushed me to help attacking that and getting that. Because once he was comfortable, I think, and happy with the support he was getting from the aircraft logistically, he's like, okay, well, what are we going to do about the demonstration? Because we saw eye to eye when it came to the reasons why it was important to do that. Which I'm super lucky, because I could very easily had a boss that thought otherwise, or an admiral at Sinatra that thought otherwise, because the admiral was on board with it too. And I'd be like, okay, well, I can't argue with them because their logic is sound, with the issues that we ran into before. But what we really had on our side was data, because unlike the T model, the J model has 20 something accelerometers, G meters all throughout the aircraft. So we could download all that data every flight and kind of compare it and see, hey, what are the spikes? What's causing the airframe fatigue, and why? And so we started having a lot of conversations with engineers, giving them full disclosure, our intent, like what we wanted. And from an engineering perspective, they don't want us to fly demonstration because it's just going to put more stress on the airframe, and they want to fly those planes as long as possible and keep them and get as much as they can out of them, which is totally understandable. And naturally, the demonstration is kind of scary because it does put some stress on the plane. But if you fly it correctly, if you fly it in a way that still puts on a good show but doesn't peel off a lot of life off the airframe, we could find some sort of middle ground there, So we had to modify. In a lot of ways, we felt like test pilots because we were flying the T model profile and a J model, which the J model is a lot different. So it's got a significant amount more thrust. Avionics suite is completely different. So you got a couple things that you got to think about. So we brought in a Lockheed test pilot, Steve Knobloch, great guy. He was actually one of the pilots that actually looped a C-130. It's not an actual loop. He'll be the first one to tell you that, but he did an incredible demonstration in the C-130J in Paris, I believe, was when they looped it. So he was more than willing to come work with us and kind of give us his 2 cents, which was basically, your demonstration's boring, because what he could do in the plane was just like, oh my gosh, I was just getting anxiety watching his HUD footage, because he showed us a video. I was like, gee, I don't think I could do this. This is crazy. But he worked with us a lot on how do we mitigate? How do we bring down the stress to the aircraft? And then how do we pitch this to the engineers? Because he was an engineer. He was a test pilot. He knew the way to kind of make this all work. So he was huge in helping us out with the plan going forward. And Yeah, so that we got the green light. Basically, you just chip away. Like, hey, can we get 5 flights? Because we'd flown it in the simulator thousands of times leading up to it. So we were in the simulator for hours doing this profile and kind of tinkering with it. Because not only are the systems different as far as the engines and props go and thrust, the whole dynamic between crew members and responsibilities in the flight deck is very different. So we had to work through that because the way they flew it in the T model just wasn't going to work with the J model with the responsibilities and how we kind of divvied them up because there's a lot of things that we had to change and we kind of had to like work through that in the simulator. Be like, all right, is this going to work? It's not really great. So we'd have to kind of modify it as we went until we finally got to a good product where we felt like it was very safe. We felt good about it. It was very the thing you want is to get it to where it's teachable and you can repeat it. It's easily repetitive. So you can maybe tweak some of the profile based on the show sites, but at the end of the day, it's going to be the same thing almost every time. And then you have to make it simple enough to where you can teach it to the next group that's coming through to where it's not super hard to fly. You should be able to teach it to a pilot from the fleet, like a normal pilot from the fleet. You should be able to teach it to. So we had to get down to that point. We finally did that in the sim to where we're comfortable enough. And then we had to pitch this to the engineers and also boss and then the admiral. Can we get like 5 or 10 flights just to test it out in the actual plane at altitude too? So basically took it out in the first. I'm trying to remember the first time it was out over just off the coast of Pensacola. There's a warning area out there that we worked in. And we did it up at altitude. And I remember the first time we did it, there was a couple things, especially on the high performance climb. I felt like the plane just kept climbing. It wasn't going to hit the airspeed. It was supposed to slow to a certain airspeed to where you finally have to push the yoke over and get the nose down. Well, it just kept going. And we're just like looking at each other like, is this plane? Because that's how much power it had too. It just kept going. So we had to kind of modify that a little bit, but I think I talked about it before. This is the first time you did it. You don't normally push negative 0.5, negative 0.7 Gs in a C-130, especially a plane that, had been on, I don't know how many deployments this specific aircraft went on in England, but I know they put their planes through the ringer and you could just see all sorts of stuff come up from underneath the deck and behind the flight station. When we first did that, I'm just like, oh my, there's this stuff floating everywhere, from every crevice that came up from God knows when. So that was a fun experience doing that for the first time. But so we kind of went through actually flying it because it's different to fly in the sim than the actual aircraft. The sim can only get you so far. You actually have to fly in the plane. So we learned a couple things, but we got enough data there to help send to the engineers like, okay, can you look at this data now? Because at that point, they were just blanketing a 25-hour penalty factor. For every hour of demo, they were peeling off 25 hours of airframe life off the plane, which is a huge amount. Like, that's crazy. So we were like, definitely need to get that number down if we want to fly this plane as long as we want to and keep supporting the team and not have it go to the boneyard years before, we anticipated like the last one. So we just didn't want that to happen again. So we went back to the drawing board, modified a couple things, and really the one maneuver that was actually the biggest spike for us was the flat pass, which is just a high speed. You're not pulling any G. You're just down the line low and as fast as the plane can go. I think we hit like 310 knots on that, but we had no idea that was the one maneuver that was actually the biggest hurter for us. All because the wings flex, because they're creating so much lift at that point, at that speed, they're flexing upwards and they're putting a lot of stress on like the wing box area of the aircraft. So it's putting a lot of fatigue in that wing box area when you're doing that speed. Because it's a high lift, high wing design, it's going to be creating a ton of lift at that speed. And it's just, you'll see in some pictures when we're doing a flat pass, the wings are like flexing upwards, which is putting a lot of stress on the wing box area. So we learned about that. We didn't know that. So we ended up getting finally to a point to where, hey, we have the data. We know when we want this plane to last, and we can kind of create a graph. All right, we can't overfly this glide slope. Otherwise, this plane is going to go to the boneyard sooner than later, sooner than we want. So we had to help manage that, and we got a ton of help from the maintenance officer. Brian Ave was huge in helping with that respect, because we don't really track our planes in that way in the fleet. In the Navy, they do, because due to landing on the ship and everything, that puts a lot of stress on the jets. I don't think, I could be speaking out of turn here, but like I don't think we track our C-130s like that in the Marine Corps fleet. I just don't think they're tracked that closely. So we wanted to create some sort of graph or way we could track the aircraft life. And then after every demonstration, or after every month, we would allocate a certain amount of demonstrations that we could fly to help get in the show, but also not overfly the aircraft. So there's a lot of updating we had to do. Like, we only got 8 demonstrations this month, so we'll have to use them at these shows, and we can't fly on Sundays now because we have to we basically just pulled it out of the show on Sunday because that's the pack-up day anyways. And if something were to happen to the plane during a demonstration where it was down or needed an inspection for like an over G or overspeed, that's a big deal, because now the team can't go home that day until that plane is inspected and ready to go. So it would buy us another day if, as pilots, we try not to do that. We try not to exceed anything, but it bought us another day in case something did. So we kind of just pulled Bert out of the show on Sundays and just left it there to make sure it was prepped and ready to go to fulfill that number one mission. It's like, be there, be reliable, and be the logistical support asset. The demonstration is fine and great, but it needs to be there. It has to be there. It's a 1-for-1 asset for the team, and it has to be ready to go on pack-up day, because we're a traveling circus and we're on to the next place right away, as soon as we pack up on Sunday. So that's kind of how we got there. And luckily, it's awesome seeing it still flying the show. It's really nice.
So Saturday is the day to go. If you're going to go to a show, go Saturday.
Yeah, Saturday. You can make a Friday, which is technically a practice day for most places. I would highly recommend Friday or Saturday, because then you get to see Bert fly most of the time.
Can you talk a little bit about, obviously there's been much lamenting about the loss of JATO, which was something that the T model used to be able to do. But my understanding is that the J model has a similar sort of thrust profile or amount of thrust as what the JATO models could afford. Can you talk a little bit about that and any other unique capabilities that the J model has?
Yeah, but I think that was one of the mission parameters when Lockheed went to the drawing board with this new Super Hercules idea. They was like, let's just create the new prop design and engine design. We won't need JATO at that point. We can match the takeoff roll distance and climb profile with those two changes alone. So we don't even have the hookups for JATO bottles on the J model. They just don't exist. So for that reason, but yes, depending on the weight, you can pretty much match a JATO. If you were to just ghost a T model with JATOs and compare it to the takeoff profile of just a light J model, it'd be pretty much the same in a lot of ways. So it looks awesome, and I really wish I had the opportunity to do it. And that was definitely one of the highlights of the Blue Angels show, was that. And we thought about how can we bring something like that back, whether it's just doing a flare jettison on takeoff or something like that, because the Herc can carry a lot of flares on it for heat-seeking missiles and stuff, and for countermeasures. It can carry a lot. So if we did something like that on takeoff, it would be kind of cool. So we thought about that, but that's a whole nother issue with ordnance and all that stuff. But yeah, it just doesn't even have the capability to put JATO bottles on it. But the history is still there. You'll still walk around the squadron spaces. You'll see some painted up JATO bottles. And then especially out in El Centro, out in the desert, there's a ton of these things littered around, these expended JATO bottles everywhere. And I hope you get the opportunity to interview some of the guys from the 70s and 80s, because they got some wild stories about JATO bottles and sometimes things going wrong. So they've got some great ones. I couldn't believe some of these stories. But yeah, sadly, we don't do that anymore, although the profile is still impressive. I think we can modify the profile now to kind of really accentuate what the Super Hercules is capable of, because right now they are pretty much flying a T model-esque profile. So it's a bit safe for the J model for what it can actually do. And if you can notice a couple things, this is kind of getting off the JDO profile topic, but if you look at if you compare the profile for the landing, where they do that, short field landing, assault landing, you can only hold nose down for not very long, like, because you push down 25 degrees nose down. The T model could hold that for a lot longer because it had that big area prop that would just basically be a paddle out there. When you pull it to idle, it's almost just like this in the air, and it's a big drag air brake basically for the Herc. But the J model can only go so flat with that curved, efficient prop, the Dowdy prop. So you'll see us having to level out a lot sooner because this plane will start speeding up significantly. It can't hold that slow airspeed, so you'll see it kind of have to pull up a little bit because you'll overspeed the flaps at that point. So all those little things we had to worry about. But the JDO stuff, man, I really wish I got to do that. It looked pretty cool. And I think the last one was in 2009 or something like that. It was the last JDO shot. But sadly, I'm sure we'll come up with something. There's some creative people out there that'll come up with something that's equally as cool. So we'll see.
Josh Sultan was telling me that in the fleet they can shoot missiles out the back. Maybe you could get some of those in there.
Yeah, I won't. I'm not going to be the guy to ask. That's for sure. But there's some options out there. I think there's some stuff you could do.
You could always loop it. I'm sure that would go over well.
Be me. I'll tell you that right now. But if someone is brave enough to do that, that'll be awesome. Like, that's pretty cool. Because like I said, the J model is capable of so much more than we're actually doing, I think, in this demonstration. Like a loop, like it can do that, that's pretty cool. But they were doing some stuff. If you look at the video of the Paris Air Show when they were advertising the new L100, the civilian variant, man, they're doing some stuff in that plane that I'm like, that was kind of heart stopping as a pilot for the C-130. It's like, geez, that's crazy stuff they're doing. So
I want to get into just a little bit of like Bert history here, like sort of rapid fire stuff. We've all heard the story, but I'd like to get your version of what you've heard of the story of the name, where the name came from.
Oh, the name? Yeah. So as far as I know, in 1970 or 1970s, they probably already had the C-130, but there was a few kids walking around. They said they thought the plane, because Fat Albert was a big cartoon at the time, very popular. And they said that plane looks like Fat Albert, and it kind of just stuck from there, and it kind of spread. The pilots and the air crew talked about it, and like, that's pretty cool. We should start calling it Fat Albert. And from there, it kind of stuck, and the team loved it. So a lot of people call it Bert. It's funny because everyone that works in the Fat Albert shop, they're just collectively called Bert a lot of the times. Myself and Jackson or Huckaba might walk in the ready room, and then the pilots would be like, "Oh, what's up, Bert?" And it's like, that's all three of us. They just call us Bert. So it's just kind of funny how it all spread. So. And
the airlines piece of it, Fat Albert Airlines, what is that? Where did that come from, and what does it represent?
That's a good question. I think, where the airline piece came from, I thought it was just definitely a play off of Fat Albert, but the airlines piece, I don't know when they started putting that decal above the door. That's pretty cool. But, we fly 40 to 48 Marines and sailors crammed in there. And I think they started calling it Fat Albert Airlines. Probably not the most comfortable, and probably not getting 5 stars on Uber. But I think they just, they love calling it Fat Albert Airlines, flying Fat Albert Airlines. So they got a lot of miles. We need to set up some sort of program or something like that for them. But I think that's kind of where it came from, is from the enlisted troops.
And in the cockpit, if you look at videos from inside the cockpit, there's something on the sort of dash there. There's a little like hula dancer. Do you know the background behind that? So
the history behind that, every M1 essentially gets a hula girl for their own specific. They get to choose their M1 is the senior pilot on the Bert team. So when they become M1, they better have a hula girl ready to go, because that's going to be theirs for the year. And it's kind of like a good luck charm. She's always there with us. It's also a great turbulence indicator for where we're at. if the turbulence is rough, she's shaking a lot. So yeah, every M1, and then when I became M1, my dad is a prior Navy pilot. He actually acquired one from Hawaii, so mine was authentic. I like to brag about. It was really from Hawaii. So she was great, brought us a lot of luck. We never went down once. I don't think we never missed a show, so worked out great. But it's a good luck charm, basically.
Okay, so I just want to sort of start to wrap us up here. I have like two sort of questions to sort of close it out. First one is, what was your favorite part of being on the Blue Angels and flying Fat Albert?
My favorite part about being on the Blue Angels, it kind of goes to both. The favorite part of being on the Blue Angels and flying Fat Albert is the people you work with. The Marines and sailors from all different backgrounds, and they're handpicked because you have to apply to be on the team. It just showed me what a unit is capable of when you have every single individual on that team that cares. And it forces you to rise to the occasion and be the best version of yourself, whether you like it or not. Like, you're surrounded by people that are better than you, in every aspect. And so it is very humbling, and forces you to be great and pursue excellence. And, we say it all the time on the team, but it's true. It is true. And it really was like getting a higher level education and teamwork for me. It was like getting a master's or doctorate in teamwork, because like, that's what we did. It wasn't about you. It was about the team. No one cared about the individual. It was all of us in it together, achieving a collective goal and helping inspire the next generation. So it was just cool. There were moments that you'd witness stuff that was just incredible. The teamwork involved to get something going, or like it was a problem, but we solved it with teamwork. And it was just such a great thing to see sometimes and witness. But that was my favorite part, probably just the people that you're surrounded by, the Marines and sailors from all different backgrounds and experiences. I learned a lot. It was awesome. Learned a ton.
You're not alone in that thinking. That's been what everyone has said. So.
Really? Yeah.
That's not to call you unoriginal. It's just it's a testament to the what the team is like. That's what everyone says.
It is. Yeah.
That's so cool to see.
Yeah, it's true.
Last question here for you. Just, it might be a bit leading, but I wanted to get your take. Is it fair to say that the Blue Angels demonstration as it exists today, and the exact format it is today, would not be possible without Fat Albert?
As it exists today, I don't think so. I think it's tough for me to talk about because C-130 pilots in general, C-130 community, we don't look for the recognition in any way. When we just like to do our job and be the most reliable people, and we want to be there to answer the call anytime anyone needs something from us. And we don't want them to have to worry. Like, my goal on the team is to be the least of boss's worries. Like, I want Fat Albert to be the least of his worries, and the ability to support the team at the drop of a hat and go help fix a jet or whatever it is, anything. We were there to help do the thing, do the mission. And I hope no one really worried too much about us actually being able to do that. So I think having that capability and that asset and the Marines that operate that aircraft and take pride in operating, and then they come from a community that is the exact same way. Every single Marine Air Wing can't operate without a C-130 squadron. Guarantee it's not going to work if they don't have a C-130 squadron ready to go, and that's super reliable and mission ready. They're going to fail, flat out. It's just not going to work. And the same thing goes for the team, and we saw that it was painful without having Fat Albert on the team. It was so painful. It was very, very difficult to do the things we wanted because it took such a level of flexibility out of our mission. We weren't able to do things the way we. Now we have the freedom with that aircraft. So to answer your question, no, I don't think the team would be able to do what it does without Fat Albert being the backstop to help pick things up literally and figuratively, but help, be that support asset that we could always be relied upon. If things went south, it's okay. Like Fat Albert is got it. We'll do the mission. We'll get the parts for this jet needed in order to do the show. Never canceled a show due to maintenance. And I think a lot of that has to do with the readiness of Fat Albert and the motivation of the team and the Marines to do that, because, there's a lot of late flights you do after air show. Jet might go down for whatever reason. It's not going to fly tomorrow morning unless it gets these parts or a new engine. And, we just go fly, go wherever it is, go get it in the middle of the night, come back, deliver those parts. They get that jet back up and running for the show, and people wouldn't know any different. But we took a lot of pride in that. I think that's a huge part of the team, that what is helps make the team special, because there's no other demonstration team like that has their own dedicated logistical asset, C-130.
Great. All right. I know I said that was the last question, but is there anything that I didn't cover or didn't ask you about that you wanted to make sure that you got out into the air here before we start to wrap up?
The only thing I'd like to mention is just, like, personally, at least from my end, and what we truly wanted to represent is not only the Navy and the Marine Corps, it was the VMGR community. So the C-130 community in the Marine Corps is pretty small. I mean, there's only I guess 4 active duty squadrons now spread throughout the globe, but they really do an amazing job. And the Marines that I met in those squadrons, I've got lifelong friendships with it. Those squadrons are doing God's work for sure. And like I said, I don't think the Marine Air Wing they're so reliant upon those squadrons, and there just isn't a whole lot of them, but they do a lot of work. And they're probably one of the most reliable assets they have. And I think we wanted to represent that personally on the team when we were pilots and aircrew going to the Blue Angels, because we thought it was so special. So it was just kind of cool for us to help. And a lot of the Navy pilots or Navy sailors had never worked with a C-130 squadron member or have ever seen a C-130 before. So it was really cool for us to kind of be taken into the team to help spread our love for our community and help hopefully represent it the way it should be represented. So I think that was another part of what made it special.
Gotta love the Marines.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, Rick, thank you so much for taking the time to chat with me and everybody about Fat Albert and your time on the team. It's been great.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for your time. I know this is a lot of work for you to do, so we truly appreciate it. And, all around great questions. I really appreciate it. Brings up a lot of awesome memories. So thank you very much.
We just love Bert. That's it.